Alright, so we're going to talk about the digestive system. Go ahead and make sure you have your guided notes flipped lesson packet in front of you that's titled the digestive system, and get ready to fill in the blanks as we go along through this presentation. Okay, the mouth is the first part of the digestive system, and this is where the food first enters into the body. The mouth is important because it's going to do a process we call mechanical digestion. Mechanical digestion, if you look down here, I have the vocab word. It is the physical change of food by chewing, grinding, churning, or squeezing. So as your teeth chomp down on the food and your tongue moves the food around in your mouth and your mouth moves, this is breaking down the food into smaller pieces. It's going to be easier to swallow. Your saliva in your mouth is going to mix with the food, which is not only going to soften down the food, but saliva also contains enzymes. And we know that enzymes work to help break down things. And so your food's going to start breaking down some of the nutrients while it's in your mouth before you even swallow it. As the chewing continues, the tongue is going to move the food towards the back of the mouth, and this chewed food has a special name. We call this a bolus. It's a very funny word, but that's the chewed up ball of food. We call it a bolus, and this is the substance that you are going to swallow and which will travel down your esophagus. Throughout today's lesson, after each slide, you're going to see a picture of the diagram that you see in front of you now. You have this in your packet on the very last page, as well as a broken up diagram as we go through each step of the digestion system. After each one, I'm going to write in the part that we just talked about. So right now we're going to go ahead and add in the label for the mouth. So go ahead and fill that in on your own diagram as well. Alright, the second part of digestion occurs at the back of the throat. The back of the throat is called the pharynx. Right? At the back of the throat there are two tubes. We have the trachea, which is going to go to the lungs, and the esophagus, which is going to go to the stomach, which is where we want our food to go. In order to prevent food from going to the lungs instead of going to the lungs, we have this flap we call the epiglottis. Now, whenever you swallow, the flap closes over the trachea so that the food goes down the esophagus instead of down the trachea. So if you've ever heard of the saying, something going down the wrong pipe, this occurs whenever food accidentally goes down the trachea instead of going down the esophagus. All right, and we are going to add esophagus to our diagram. The next step of digestion is going to occur in our esophagus. So after we swallow, the bolus, which remember is the chewed ball of food that we make in our mouth, is going to travel down the esophagus. This is going to move down the esophagus to the stomach through a process we call peristalsis. Now, peristalsis is the squeezing action of muscle contractions. So basically, as the food goes into the esophagus, your muscles on the inside of your esophagus are going to contract, means they're going to squeeze back and forth, which is going to push and move the food down the esophagus. If you think back to our Magic School Bus video that we watched when they were for lunch and they went inside Arnold, once they got into the esophagus, Miss Frizzle was able to turn off Magic School Bus because the esophagus muscles were able to move the bus down toward the stomach without them actually having to do anything to move themselves. Okay, on this diagram, we're not going to be adding anything new. We're just going to, we've just talked about the mouth, the esophagus. Now the pharynx would be at the back of the throat. We did not add that in earlier, but that's where it's located. Another important part of the digestive system is the liver. And while the food doesn't actually travel to the liver is responsible for making bile, which is going to help break down the fats that are present in our food. Bile produced by the liver is also going to be stored in the gallbladder until it's ready to be used. So the liver is very important in helping us to break down our food once we get to the stomach. All right, so to our diagram, we're going to go ahead and add liver. You notice the liver rests right on top of our stomach. So here's the liver, makes it perfect for when it's able to release the bile into the stomach to help break down the fats. All right, the stomach is where a lot of the action occurs. It is a muscular sac, which is made up of a type of muscle called smooth muscle. We'll talk more about muscles here in a few weeks. The stomach is responsible for doing both mechanical and chemical digestion. So remember, mechanical is going to be changing the physical shape of the food. Chemical is going to actually be breaking down the different molecules down into smaller parts, which is going to be important for our bodies to be able to absorb the nutrients and use them in our cells. So what's going to happen is gastric fluids are going to be secreted from glands in the stomach. Some of these secrete hydrochloric acid, which we know is extremely acidic, and these fluids are going to help break down the food. So these acids that are going to be released into the stomach help to start breaking down the foods this is a chemical digestion. As the food is coated with enzymes, remember enzymes help to break down things. This is also going to help with not only chemical digestion, but also mechanical digestion. The smooth muscles are going to contract, turn, and mix the food, which is going to increase the mechanical digestion of the food. Eventually, what's going to happen is the food is going to become a liquid. Now, remember when we first swallowed the food, we called it a bolus. Well, once it's digested in the stomach, we call it it's a liquid, and we call it chyme. Not chyme, it's chyme. The chyme is then going to move on to the next step, which is the small intestine. All right, so let's go ahead and fill in stomach on our diagram. Again, we know the stomach is located right here. Most of us know what a stomach looks like, and the liver is on top of the stomach. The sixth step of digestion occurs in the small intestine. When food exits the stomach, it's going to first enter a section of the small intestine we call the duodenum. And the duodenum is a very special place because this is where the bile that's created by the liver is going to be released. So as the bile is released into the duodenum, we're going to start continuing to break down the fats in the food even further down than they were broken down in the stomach. The chyme is going to be moved into the intestine and move through the intestine by muscle contraction. This is very important in digestion. Most of the chemical digestion and nutrient absorption is going to occur in the small intestine. So our small intestine is going to be the place in the digestive system that's going to start absorbing the nutrients into the bloodstream so that the different body tissues and cells in your body are able to use those nutrients in order to carry out their life processes that are necessary for you to live. We have, in addition to the small intestine, we have the pancreas. We have the pancreas, the liver, the gallbladder, which are going to help by chemical digestion by releasing enzymes and bile into the small intestine to help with digestion. Again, we talked about that being released into the duodenum. The lining of the small intestine contain villi, and villi are, as described right here, they are finger-like projections covered in microvilli, which are going to increase the surface area and allow more nutrients to be absorbed. So the inside of our small intestine might look something like this. And these little finger-like projections, these are villi. So this would be one villi. These are villi. What's going to happen is the food is going to be able to come in. So this is our food. It's going to come in. It's going to surround, right? It'll surround all of these microvilli. Because of the way they're shaped, that means they have an increased surface area and they can absorb lots of nutrients. Inside each of these microvilli are capillaries. Remember, capillaries are the smallest type of blood vessel present. And what they're going to do is they're going to directly absorb nutrients into the blood through diffusion. Remember, that does not require energy, so that we can carry these nutrients to the rest of our body. Okay, so now to your your diagram, go ahead and add gallbladder, pancreas, and small intestine. As you can see, the gallbladder is located right here. It's this tiny little thing right beneath the liver and beside the stomach. The pancreas is this squiggly thing that's right beneath your stomach, and your small intestine looks like the big spaghetti noodles or the worms that are right in the middle of the square-looking thing. All right, the last step of digestion occurs in the large intestine. The large intestine is where water and fiber that are not digested are going to move. The large intestine's main job is to remove water and salts from the undigested material and return this water back into your body so your body can stay hydrated and it's not getting rid of extra water that it could possibly use. These are going to be absorbed through capillaries. Remember, the capillaries are the smallest blood vessels, and they're just 1 cell thick. So the capillaries are going to absorb the water and the salts, and they're going to transport them back in the blood throughout the rest of your body. The remaining material is going to be compacted and prepared to exit the body as waste. These are things that we do not need. Now, in your large intestine or your colon, you're going to have bacteria such as E. coli that are going to live here and help to break down the undigested food even further so we can totally maximize the nutrients that we are getting from our meals. So this is one way that bacteria can sometimes be helpful for us. Now, sometimes if we do not remove water or we keep too much water, this could result in diarrhea, which is never pleasant. So our large intestines play a huge role in making sure that we are only getting rid of things that we absolutely cannot use and that our body is utilizing everything that it can in order to make sure that everything is able to function to the best of its ability. All right, here is the very last slide. This has all of the parts of the digestive system completely labeled. Let's review real fast. First, we start with the mouth. From the mouth, we chew up our food. It forms a bolus. Remember that mechanical digestion occurs in the mouth. It travels to the back of the throat and the pharynx. As we swallow, the epiglottis is going to cover up the trachea to make sure the food goes down the esophagus, which is then going to take it to the stomach. Once it gets to the stomach, it's going to undergo chemical and mechanical digestion, and it's going to be pushed then, the bolus will be turned into fluid, which will be called the chyme. Chyme is going to put it into the small intestine, which is here, and in the small intestine, in the duodenum, which is the first part of the small intestine, the liver and gallbladder and pancreas are going to release bile and enzymes into the duodenum to help break down the chyme even further. In the small intestine, we are going to be absorbing nutrients into our bloodstream through the villi. After the food is done the chyme is done passing through the small intestine, whatever is left over is going to pass into the large intestine, which is this big thing that goes around here like a square. In the large intestine, we are going to absorb any water that's remaining and any salts that are remaining back into the bloodstream. This is going to compact the waste and get it ready to exit the body. For those of you that are curious, the appendix is actually located right here at the very bottom of the large intestine. You can see it's very, very small. So at the very end of the large intestine, it has a special name we call the rectum, and when the waste gets ready to exit the body, it's going to exit out of the body part called the anus. So this is the digestive system. Make sure you have every blank filled in, everything labeled. You will need this to answer your questions on your assignment, as well as use on your quiz that you'll be having over this on Friday in class.